The story begins with a big, fat lie.
Mr. Codman,
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer.
Ever since the war started in 2003, there's been many calls for an inquiry into the process that was behind the beginning of the war. Tony Blair met George Bush in April 2002 in Crawford, Texas. It appears that this was the turning point in the decision to move the whole war on terror away from Afghanistan onto Iraq. And throughout that summer there was a build-up of political forces on both sides of the Atlantic, and by September there were forces already in the whole region. The rest we well know, the arguments, the utterly fallacious arguments that were used about the existence of weapons of mass destruction, the decision to prevent Mohammed al-Baradei and the Hans Blix from returning to Iraq in January 2003, and then finally the attack on Iraq on March the 20th. Afterwards, there were inquiries held in Britain by the Foreign Affairs Committee of Parliament, the Defence Committee of Parliament, the Intelligence Committee of Parliament, and there were separate inquiries into the death of Dr. David Kelly and the Butler inquiry. Butler was the Secretary to the Cabinet. None of these inquiries received as much cooperation as they should have done. None of them actually went to the heart of the whole issue. So ever since then, we've been making demand for an inquiry.
In 2003, the movement against the Iraq War began to form in the streets and in meeting halls.
Hi, I'm Bill Davis. I'm with Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And I'm also with Chicago Labor Against the War. It's good that you're out here today. It was good that you were out here before this, and it's going to be good that you and more of you are going to be out here as this war continues. And this war will continue when it goes to what they term an occupation, and Wolfowitz's shadow government is set up with an American military viceroy and all the strings being pulled by Washington because they want to reap the profits and the spoils of the war for their own pockets. And they want you, your brothers and sisters, your family, and your friends and neighbors to pay for this, and they want you to fight this war too. What are you going to tell them? Hell no.
One of many anti-war groups started in 2003 was U.S. Labor Against the War, a national organization that first met in a union hall in Chicago.
Well, I think it's been a wonderful meeting. We got a lot of people together, over 100 people from all over the country, to unite the voice against the war. There have been a lot of union people arguing against this war, but now we've come together as a single group to work against it. I myself have a son who's on a ship in the Persian Gulf. He's in the Marines, and I don't want to see him go in and either get killed, get wounded, or have to kill or wound innocent Iraqi civilians.
I think it was a really good process in the fact that we were able to hear a lot of different people's views and hear things that we might not think about ourselves. My local is pretty leftist, and people are on board against the war, but it was interesting talking to other trade unionists that have other obstacles to overcome. So I think it was really good for people to come together and talk about those things.
As the anti-war movement grew, the government increased police-state repression of protests and marches.
Is a fact that I no longer have the right to express myself in the United States. I no longer have the right to walk up to somebody and say whatever my opinion happens to be. I can't stand on a street corner and shout at the top of my lungs, I don't like the president, because that's what happens to you if you do that. Police surround you. Oh, you sure you can speak? Maybe you can't speak on that particular street corner. Sure, you can hand stuff out, but you have to do it through a throng of police. And what person on a sidewalk wants to get a flyer from somebody who's surrounded by men with guns? I mean, it's completely ridiculous. There hasn't been a violent protest since 1968 where the police started beating on protesters. In the city of Chicago, we are so peaceful. 2 years ago, we would walk up and down Michigan Avenue 3 times with 4 police in the crowd. That was it. And then the war started, and these guys went nuts. Boeing came to town. They gave them $28 million to buy armored uniforms and bigger sticks and tasers, things like that. since March 20th, 2 years ago, since the TABD 2.5 years ago, the police have been insane. The transatlantic business dialogue was where Boeing coughed up $28 million for Chicago and state police to have armor gel uniforms, bulletproof everything, knee cuffs, elbow cuffs, longer billy clubs made of oak, not of pine, barricades, shields, new visors, helmets, tasers, electric stun guns that are handheld. So there's been an incredible leap on the other side. The state has increased their street power incredibly while we're still out here peacefully. So there's a huge disparity there. And that's all about I got to say.
We have seen in the past, in past unjust wars, that when the authorities see the tide turning against them, that they respond with attacks on civil liberties, and that is precisely what we are seeing here today. The city of Chicago is clamping down on free speech because people are turning against this war.
They have been told at the Federal Plaza that they have no permit for the rally.
We have a permit. We have a permit for Federal Plaza.
Give me this cover. We have a permit. You're under arrest.
What is the charge?
What was going through my mind right here at this point was the police had made it abundantly clear that they were going to shut this thing down at any time, and that we had to get our message out, because unfortunately I think a lot of people in the progressive movement still don't get it in terms of the connection between a war like this abroad and civil liberties at home. That whenever you've got a war which is unjust, which people are turning against it, they increasingly protest it, and that is a threat to the regime.
Douglas, from Lloyd Harbor, New York.
Correct.
Marine, first lieutenant, killed on 29 June 1965. Panel 2, 25 lines down from the top.
At the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., people wearing anti-war buttons were denied entry.
This is my freedom of speech. I am not giving up my freedom just because some guy tells me I have to look at some names on a wall.
Excuse me.
This is not fair.
He's got a peace button. Now you can't wear a peace button? Can you wear a peace button? You can hide that. You can hide it. I don't want to hide it.
I didn't see him. I seen it. So, you can't wear peace in here?
Please walk around, talk to the other people.
It says I want my troops to come home. It's not like
you can't walk through with that. You can't sit here and run your mouth like this. You have that right. You can't do this. Yes, you can. Sorry.
Can you show me a line?
No demonstrating within certain boundaries of all the memorials. So, these Vietnam vets are asking people out of respect for them that they fought the war to leave the stuff alone. Any kind of pushing and shoving, of course, is not appropriate.
In the Code of Federal Regulations, absolutely not.
No placards.
No placards down here.
No freedom of speech.
Freedom of speech, absolutely not in this area.
Not the shirt. You can button that. The buttons and stuff can be construed. The buttons can be construed as a form of saying, a form of speech, a form of protest. That's why they're saying that.
Yes.
Okay. You mean, in order to walk by this memorial, I have to close my
I didn't know what your shirt said. I thought she said something else. But like your buttons, if they think that...
Kalamazoo for peace?
Yeah, I don't see anything for that. I don't know why they wanted you to take these out.
I covered this.
But these signs
keep military recruiters out of schools.
Why are you crying?
Because she... Let me
talk
Let
to
her
me.
talk.
Thank you.
I can't stand how people are treating each other. It's not right.
Okay.
Because I have an opinion. People are alienating me in my own country.
Listen, you can have your opinion, but
I'm just holding aside.
And ideological domination took other forms, such as high-priced military advertising campaigns, paid for by our tax dollars.
This is the corporate headquarters of Leo Burnett, multinational, multi-billion-dollar grossing revenues advertising corporation. And they're the ones that came up with the Army of One campaign, which uses all kinds of racist and misleading television commercials aimed at particularly Black and Latino youth between like 17 and 24. You know, promising them fun and adventure and making the military seem like it's just, you know, it's all fun and games, you know. No mention of war. I mean, you don't even see soldiers in uniform in these commercials. So the reason we're coming here is because it's a campaign against Burnett to get them to stop advertising for the Army, stop advertising for the war. I mean, that's the basic idea to have this here today.
The recruitment of the youth right now is in full swing. The stormtroopers are beginning their surround of us. It's just blood for oil, our children's blood, their children's blood. It's just a never-ending cycle that just needs to stop. Right now, this particular feeder march that's going on right now is, as I understand it, an anti-recruitment demonstration of the recruitment of our youth. And it's linked directly to the Safe Sin March because of the recruitment of students at that particular school and other schools around the city. Marines, Navy, and Army are regularly at high schools recruiting students, even to the point of 8th grade. So this is in direct correlation to that march, and this is a very, very important march that's going on right now.
To sell the war, corporate media outlets treated the anti-war movement as if it didn't exist.
There's been very little talk, at least since Abu Ghraib, when there was a sort of brief momentary mention of this in the media. There's been very little talk about these atrocities, and yet all this past week in the alternative media on Democracy Now!, Amy Goodman's radio show and television show, we've been hearing testimony, one soldier after another, talking about atrocities that they witnessed or themselves took part in. And that, I think, is symptomatic also of the media's treatment of the war. In the mainstream American media, there's been virtually no reporting about the fairly large anti-war demonstrations happening in Europe. Over the past week, there's been some large demonstrations in England, and also a number of demonstrations in places like Germany and France. These are not getting reported at all. So there's been, I think, a virtual blackout on the anti-war movement, and that's just sort of on top of all of the other distortions in the media's coverage of the war.
Iraq for Iraqis! Troops out now! Iraq for Iraqis! Troops out now!
While press censorship continued in the U.S., in Iraq, the occupation government's suppression of journalists drove them into the streets in protest.
احنا شاركنا بهاي التظاهرة من أجل أن ندافع عن حق التعبير عن الرأي وللدفاع عن حياة وسلامة وحق الصحفي أحمد عبد الحسين وغيره من الصحفيين والوقوف ضد أي انتهاك لحق وحرية التعبير عن الرأي. نعتقد أنه إذا بدت هذا النوع من الانتهاكات والتهديدات للصحفيين يمكن أن تستمر وتتصاعد وممكن أن يحرم كل المجتمع وليس الصحفيين فقط من حق التعبير عن رأيهم. نعتقد أنه هذا النوع من التظاهرات ومن التجمعات ممكن أن تكون مفيدة لصد أي تجاوز من قبل أي جهة في الحكومة، ونعتقد أنه بدون هذا النوع من الضغط على الحكومة يمكن أن يصير تمادي أكثر وأكثر بانتهاك الحريات.
Despite the efforts of the government and corporate media, the anti-war movement held firm and grew.
There's nothing good about this war, and I think the American people, at least according to the latest polls, are opposed to it. We need to do everything we can to end it.
We don't want oil. We want our children back.
Every single statement made by the Bush administration has been proven wrong, without exception.
This guy is 35% approval rating. What the hell are the Democrats afraid of, you know? It's time to just move for the kill, I mean politically, to make sure that this never happens again in this country where a small cabal of intellectuals hijacks our foreign policy, hijacks our values, and takes us to war illegitimately.
No more war! No more war!
U.S. labor against the war made a breakthrough and got the AFL-CIO to formally come out against the war.
There's just been a tremendous amount of work done in the recent period by U.S. labor against the war and people who are part of it, their affiliates, to get a resolution opposed to the war, calling for the rapid withdrawal of U.S. troops through the AFL-CIO convention in the summer of 2005. That was just a tremendous piece of work to get that done. The amount of education, the amount of conversation throughout the labor movement that was needed to bring that about. It certainly was aided quite a bit by the bringing over the delegation of Iraqi trade unionists representing 3 major labor organizations in Iraq. They toured throughout the country and were able to bring directly, worker to worker, labor leader to labor leader, the stories of what was going on there and why it was not helpful to the Iraqi labor movement, to the Iraqi people, to continue the U.S. occupation.
And around the U.S., unions became more outspoken against the war.
Thank you so much for coming down and joining our picket line against a union-busting Republican donator, Terry McRae, the CEO of Alcatraz Cruises. We have a boycott and we want to shut the damn thing down. Now we know we can shut this down. I also know we could end this war in Iraq tomorrow if the organized labor movement wanted to. If the key sectors of industry in this country said, hell no, we are not going to work until those troops are home, that war would be over today. We wouldn't have to go begging to the politicians. We wouldn't have to be out on the streets. Working people have the power to end this war now, and we must try in every possible manner to convince all our brothers and sisters in the workplace, union and non-union, that we must use our power, because withholding our labor ultimately is the power that we do have.
Veterans returning home from Iraq organized Iraq Veterans Against the War and joined the big anti-war march in Washington, D.C. in 2007.
Veterans need to speak out against the war because the American public views us higher than regular civilians because we served our country, and the government works so hard to put the military up on a pedestal. So when we speak out, it means a lot more than a regular person speaking out. And there's many reasons why we should speak out. The war is illegal. We're committing war crimes over there, using depleted uranium, cluster bombs, white phosphorus, stuff like that.
In 2008, the American people voted the warmonger Bush out of office, thinking that the Democrat Obama was a peace candidate.
I firmly believe that Barack Obama, the nation's first African-American presidential nominee, is my personal opinion. I believe he is the greatest threat to the progressive movement for change since the election of John F. Kennedy and arguably since Franklin Roosevelt. That's my honest opinion. That's my honest opinion. All right? I say that because I believe Obama can do what John McCain cannot do. Who is it that the ruling class you think wants to motivate young people to bleed and die and shed blood for oil? Who do you think is more qualified in their eyes, huh? This government needs a facelift after 8 years of Bush. Who do you think gives them a facelift? In a world where they got to compete with their rivals, a world where 7/8 of the human race is red, yellow, brown, and black, female, poor, non-Christian, and don't speak English. This is strategic.
When Obama spoke inside a restaurant in Chicago's Pakistani neighborhood, outside a protest took place against his war plans for Pakistan.
So we are against all this statement. He should come outside and apologize.
I'm Arshad Mirza. I'm ex-president of Pakistan American Congress and a long-time resident of Chicago. And we are very active in the Pakistani American community. We have been a supporter of Senator Obama. But his recent stands vis-a-vis Pakistan have been very disappointing. He's building quite a anti-Pakistani resume. Soon after he got elected, he recommended that we bomb Pakistani nuclear installations. The statement that was retracted by him, and he was to work with the community on this matter, but he never did. And now he comes out with bombing the Pakistani territory. And one fails to say how he is going to be any different from the present administration's policy, and which he is so critical of. And he is for calling troops back from Iraq, but he is for expanding the war in the region and destabilizing the whole region.
Chicago's Pakistani community organized anti-war marches, while a peace movement grew in Pakistan as well.
Pakistan is a country who is, from its beginning, the very first day of its creation, we have friendly treaties with United States. And what price we are paying? Our villages have been bombed, our people have been killed, and when those people were fighting for United States, they were freedom fighters, and today their purpose is solved. They have achieved their goals against Russia, and now we are the terrorists. It's a shame. In Kashmir, those people, the General Assembly of the United Nations, passed numerous resolutions to have plebiscite in Kashmir, but now they are terrorists. They have their own dictionary. They can name anybody whatever they want.
Mostly the working class in Pakistan and the general people in Pakistan, they are against the U.S. troops in Pakistan. It's really threatened our national sovereignty, and the war which which is going on in Pakistan is not our war. It's imposed. When the U.S. led army attacked on Afghanistan, then the war after the Afghanistan war, the war is spread in Pakistan. The U.S. drones attack, which Obama government announced that they are going to increase the drones attack, is creating a lot of unrest and a lot of hatred against the U.S. policies among the people of Pakistan.
What we got is we got a much more effective imperial CEO than Bush. In terms of what you expected to get, what lefties who participated in that campaign and those exercises expected to get, let's look at what some of the right wing expected to happen. All of you know who David Horowitz is, the reprehensible David Horowitz. This is what he wrote in the Wall Street Journal the day of the inauguration. He said, when President Obama commits this nation to war against the Islamic terrorists, as he already has in Afghanistan, he will take millions of previously alienated and disaffected Americans with him. And they will support our troops in a way that most of his party has refused to support them until now. Only Barack Obama could defang the anti-war movement that put 1 million people at a time into the streets opposing Bush's invasion of Iraq. But only a winning Democrat, only Barack Obama, could have shut down any investigation of the crimes of his predecessor. But since that never happened, the Obama administration picked up where they left off, and then some.
Dennis Kucinich, former U.S. representative from Ohio, has said, The Iraq War was not a mistake. It resulted from calculated deception. The painful, unvarnished fact is that we were lied to. When Obama took office in 2008, he announced that his administration would not investigate or prosecute the architects of the Iraq War. We must conclude then, if Bush lied to start a war, he committed a high crime. When Obama prevented an investigation, that made him complicit.